Hello, everyone. It's Carrie Rose O'Connell, your host of the Storytellers Series with New Mexico Women in Film. Today, I am happily joined by one of our members, Kristin Goodman, who is here to talk about two of her projects. Kristin, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I'm excited to talk to you today because you have two projects going on, one that our viewers will be able to see in November. So we're going to talk about first your play, #Under the Influence, and then a feature film that you're working on called Tucumcari, which for any of our viewers that don't know is a city here in New Mexico, a fantastic spot on the planet. And so I'm excited to hear more about your inspirations for using that is kind of this placeholder for that story. But let's first talk about Under the Influence. I'm assuming the hashtag is part of the title, correct?
It is. And it's all one word, just like any hashtag. Yeah.
Okay, great. And this is going to actually be a play that you're producing and putting together out of the Santa Fe Playhouse. Is that correct?
Yes. So this play was set to premiere as part of their 2020 season.
Mm-hmm.
It was supposed to go up the end of October at the Playhouse as the world premiere of it, and as a part of a very specific season they put together. And COVID happened, and so we kept kind of going back and forth, discussing how we could still do it. There are 3 actors in the play, and there's one set, which I did. I would like to say I did it intentionally. I did, but at the same time, it just came to me that way. So I can kind of give, the gods
convenient things, yeah.
God's a little credit, but really, I was just thinking like a writer, and and so we talked about various ways that we could still produce it, but COVID safe. And finally, the artistic director, Robin, said, well, what, just give me what you think or how we should do it. And I was like, Are you ready? Because it's big. She's like, okay. So I said, I want to do it at the Lensic, and I want to do it on the stage, but I want to have 3 cameras set up, and I want to have it lit by a DP and by a stage lighting designer.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to do 2 performances, sort of doing it with like a sitcom is shot in LA, where you have your rehearsals and then you go through the week, and then you have a live audience come in.
Right.
You episode. You shoot it twice, Thursday and Friday, and then the editors come in, they edit it together, and that's the end result, is the edited together version. So I said, that's what I would like to do. And she said, okay. So I got Joel Alberts, the executive director of the Lensic, together with the Playhouse. He was like, I'm on board. Let's do it. And then I pulled in Liz Stammer from Stagecoach Foundation and asked her if Stagecoach would be interested in sort of collaborating with a mentor program and bringing in all the equipment to shoot it with, and some camera operators and ACs. And she said, yeah, let's do it.
Nice.
So everybody kind of came on board, and we're still in pre-production and putting things together, but we are set to load in the Lensic in November and shoot 2 performances on November. Let me get it right. I think it's I gotta look at my calendar. It's the 2nd weekend in November. So those 2 shows will then be edited together by my very good friend and talented editor, Alessandra Calza, and a team of kids and adults who have been working with Stagecoach.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will we'll stream it out as a recorded live performance and after weekend. I think the end goal for me is to, one, get as many people to see my play.
Right, yeah.
But also, what's been really wonderful about this situation is how as artists we start to go, how do we collaborate with each other? And the film and the theater world sort of converging and saying we're going to help each other out and we're going to figure out how we can create something
Yeah.
together. A writer or a playwright, screenwriter writes a play because it might be easier to get it done. And it was so funny when suddenly I was like, oh, this is going to be harder.
Yeah. Darn.
But yeah, we were like, oh, but it's so far so good, and it's a very relevant play to this time.
Yes. I was
It's all
gonna
about,
say the topic is really interesting. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about kind of what it's based on?
yeah, so it's hashtag under the influence, and it's based on two characters who are sisters. They're mid to early 30s, and the premise is that these two sisters were the first kids of the first mommy blogger.
Okay.
So now they're adults, and one is a massive mommy influencer on social media, and the other is an out of work alcoholic waitress in Chicago. And the story, without giving too much away,
Yeah.
is the one sister shows up at her sister's basement apartment in Chicago asking for her help for something. And it pulls that sister back into that social media and world of celebrity and fame that she has tried so hard to get away from her whole
Yeah.
life. And so it's about a lot of influences. It's about addiction to alcohol, drugs, social media. It's also about the influences of media, patriarchy, um, and this idea that we don't know what's real anymore when
Mm.
we see it. And we're always questioning what's actually real and what's fake in a world where our extension of our social network is so far beyond what our human brains are capable of absorbing.
Yes.
So we're kind of always in this confused, foggy state of understanding what's really going on around us. And so I just kind of wanted to explore that with this relationship with these sisters,
Mhm.
and siblings in particular are a really great relationship to explore because so many people can identify with those
Yeah.
relationships. And the idea that your memory of a situation could be so vastly different from the person who was experiencing it with
Yes.
you growing up. And so I take that part of sibling relationship and I bring it into that social media world where we don't always agree on what we're looking at,
Yeah.
but it's there. Why can't we agree on it? Well, it's our perspective. It's totally different. It's like, well, when I was a kid, you hit my head and that's why I lost my front tooth. No, that's not how it happened. This
Yeah.
is how it happened. And it's like, no, these sort of conflict is created. So I feel like we have kind of created that world with social media, with all the comments and all the responses and the arguments, and it's become sort of this bickering in the backseat of a car.
I'm not touching you.
Right, like literally every social media post becomes like two kids yelling at each other in the back of the car, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh my god, just shut up,
Yeah.
enough, who
Stop.
cares?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's
It's
without giving away the whole
yeah.
thing.
Well, it's
Yeah.
interesting because it's a dark comedy, but you're definitely tackling some serious issues in social dynamics for modern day humans to have to deal with. I think
Mhm.
it's cool too, the backstory a little bit that you give to it. We have to remember there's generations now that grew up online. They don't have any other experience. My generation, I don't mind sharing age. So I'm 45. I was born in
Uh-huh.
75. I'm still a crossover where yeah, I live and I work on a smartphone now, but
Mhm.
when I first started engaging the world, I was literally walking up to the TV and turning a knob between 4, 7, 13, and because maybe I could get that cool off network channel,
Yeah,
like it was like,
totally.
and so I think it's important that sometimes even myself, I forget that there's generations now where this online culture has been their society that they've grown
Mhm.
up in, and it's very different and it creates a totally different set of human behaviors and human problems along with
Mhm.
benefits. But it does seem like your story really does try and tackle addiction in multiple forms,
Yes.
which
And the
I think is a great thing
influences.
to do. Yeah, and influences for sure.
Yeah, this idea that someone can make a living as an influencer
Yeah.
is so bizarre. I just started watching the Paris Hilton documentary
Oh,
that she
I'm gonna
just
have
put
to
out.
see it, yeah. I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to check it
And
out.
I was just like, "Oh gosh, like she was the conduit to this whole thing." Like I was watching it and I didn't realize, I had no idea that Kim Kardashian was her assistant.
Oh, wow.
And I'm sure there's lots of kids out there that know that.
Sure.
I had no idea that,
Yeah,
until I watched this documentary and I was like, "Oh, holy hell, like
yeah,
this was where the nugget was. This is how it all sprung up."
yeah.
And yeah, and then I haven't gotten to the part in that documentary that's all about the trauma she suffered from some private school her parents sent her to. But
Wow.
it plays into that need for that validation, that outside validation that people are constantly seeking.
Yeah,
And it's just on such a global scale that I think it's just beyond what I think the human brain is able to digest.
yeah,
And so it's causing a lot of conflict and a lot of calamity within relationships and disassociation.
yeah.
I could go on and on. But
Yeah. Yeah, it's regrettable. We created the tools that allow us to reach exponential numbers of people before we taught ourselves how to be in healthy relationships with ourselves and other
yes,
people. We kind of skip that.
absolutely.
But there's a I talk a lot in some other work that I do that there's a tendency of humans to believe that relational experience and skill set should be inherent, that somehow we should just know how to
Uh,
be around each other because we're both humans. And,
uh-huh.
I mean, that's a complete fallacy. You have to learn who you are, be able to articulate that to other people, and understand how you react to things before you can actually be in a healthy relationship, even with a stranger. And
Yeah,
so that takes tools, education, personal development. We skipped over
right.
probably a generations of education that was needed to really equip ourselves to be ready for the world wide web, you
Oh
know?
my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Was it
really
for you the observation of this on such a global scale that started making you want to write a more fictional narrative, or was it a more personal experience for you that said, "I wanna talk about these topics"?
um well, I'll tell you, I there's two aspects of it. I that I can sort of pinpoint. One, I direct a national touring show and two regional touring shows that are mom-based comedy shows.
Okay.
And while the creators of that show aren't even close to what I created, they are like, what they are is this sort of, it's called the Pump and Dump Show. And they're called Band of Mothers, and they have this great podcast. They're just brilliant, Shayna and Tracy.
Nice.
And they created a mom's night out.
Mm,
So moms were able to get away from their house, get out, have a good time, and they talk to the audience, they share information about the struggles of motherhood, but they also, Shayna writes these hysterical songs about being a mom and like parenting. It's the funniest thing you've ever seen. So I was on that journey with them, and then having a LA cast and a Chicago cast and working on that. And so the mommy world was sort of in my brain already. even though I'm a mom, but I'm not like a social media mom.
Yeah.
Um, but so I was in that world. And then I think I came home at one point from rehearsing or going and like seeing a show and giving them notes somewhere. And I was brushing my teeth, and this premise came to me,
Wow.
the names, the story, the title. And it was
Yeah.
one of those moments as a writer where you're like, "Ugh, I should write this down.
I'm gonna have to put this together.
Yeah, I'm going to put this down." So I went and I wrote it down, and then I brushed my teeth and went to bed. And then over a course of a couple of months, things would come to me, and I would just jot dialogue down or ideas, which I'm sure none of which I used. It's just sort of the process of like
Sure.
letting it kind of move through you and
Yeah.
engage in it. And then Christmas came and went, and my older kids went back to college and back to their lives. And my youngest daughter went back to school, and I was like, all right, I guess I gotta write this play. So I wrote it, and then I had a reading in Santa Fe with an LA director that came in and some actors here, and that went very well. And so I got some notes from that. And then a director in Chicago wanted to do a reading, so went out there and did that.
Nice.
And then the Santa Fe Playhouse got a hold of it and asked if we could do the world premiere. And I was like, that would be a dream. I would love to have a premiere here in my
Yeah.
beloved town. So the premise, it just kind of came to me. And I just started to pull from what I knew as a mom, but also what I was observing as a mom and also as a sister. I have a sister who
Mhm.
I'm very close with, and it just kind of wrote itself. At one point, there is a third character. There is the husband of the big social media influencer. And I put him in, he's in the second act, and he plays a pivotal role in the play, from my perspective of something that I do quite often in my writing, which is I want I want to reveal how the patriarchy really influences everything,
Yeah.
and how it really just sort of skates through things that the rest of us have to really struggle through at times.
Yeah.
And so that was the role of Mark Gold, who's the husband.
That's great. Great
I
name.
named him Gold because I was like, he's the guy that like everything he
Yes.
does. It's like,
He's
that was
Mark
good.
Gold.
That works. Oh,
Yeah.
that didn't work out? No problem. I'll just keep on going. Like I'm
Yeah.
like, I hate
Yeah.
you. So
How do
yeah,
we
I
exist
don't.
in the same world?
I know we don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
that's that's how we don't.
Yeah. So it
Mhm.
sounds like so many wonderful layers in this story, and I'm real excited to see it. I'll put out the link specifically to your show on Santa Fe Playhouse's website in our show notes so people can see exactly when it's at in November and they can buy tickets and get ready
Yes.
to support it. I think that's going to be such a wonderful production and a really important story to share right now. You know,
Yeah.
this has been an issue for a while that we've slowly started bringing into more of a dialogue socially, like should we be addressing this, or
Yeah.
but I think the COVID shutdown, it like with a lot of things, it really brought forward what's going on with systemic dysfunction in a lot of different areas. And mental health is
Mhm.
definitely one of those. And sadly, although we're able to use it for things like this, where I'm still able to help put on, a great series for women in film because we can just do it by Zoom and it has these great benefits. Geez, I haven't left my house in like 6 months,
Yeah.
If I wasn't so good at talking to myself, I would definitely be kind of a basket case, I'm sure. And so I'm just fortunate that I don't mind really hanging out with myself. But,
That's hilarious.
it really has been difficult for a lot of people. And in many ways, the pathologies of social media are now just even, you have political stuff and you have all these things going on, and it's just starting to expound. And things like you're talking about, like questioning everything, not knowing what to believe, conspiracy, truth. I mean, it's all
Yeah.
fallen to a weird ambiguity. And I think it's very difficult for everyday people to figure out what to do.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you've ever, I'm only on Instagram and I really only participate with it when I'm trying to promote something. And it's such an odd struggle that you're sort of now forced to be in,
Yeah.
because people think you're inauthentic if you're only on it when you're promoting. And I'm like, but that's what it's for.
Right,
You, and for you to think otherwise means you don't realize you're promoting yourself
right.
and your children and your dog, and you're literally selling an idea and a perspective of yourself on
Yeah.
a daily basis. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And they'll say all kinds of things. Well, I'm connecting and these are my friends, but it's this rabbit hole they go down to sort of defend this.
Yeah.
And it's so intriguing, the conversations I've had, with people who complain to me that are on Facebook, and they're like, you're not on Facebook? And I'm like, no. And they're like, I had a conversation with a woman who said, I would, but it's the only way that I can connect with my cousins and see their kids growing up. And I said, well, that's fine. I do whatever makes you happy. I said, but
Sure.
if you really are struggling and you don't want to be on Facebook, then just email them or text them a picture and ask them to text it back.
Yeah.
And her response was, well, I'm not close enough with them enough for that.
She's like, "I don't want them to have my phone number."
I know. I was like, so you're cyber stalking your family
Yeah.
that you don't really want to connect to. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
psychological weirdness around what this medium is
Right.
and the tool of it. It's really so voyeuristic that we don't even realize that we are opening a curtain for the world to see what we want to
Yeah.
show them. And if they don't like it, we're somehow like offended. Or if they do like it, we're like, oh, you like that? I'm going to give you
I
a little
need more.
more.
Yeah.
And they're not even aware of why they're doing it.
Yeah, and meanwhile, that tends to often become what is inauthentic, right? Because it becomes a big staging of, "I gotta make
Yeah,
sure it looks good," you know?
right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's real. I remember when I first started hearing in my friend's narrative, "I think can't believe so and so's not liking my posts." I remember thinking, "What?" Like, well, I know they're online because they're liking other posts. I see them liking your post or X person's post, but they haven't liked any of my posts.
Right. And you're like, that's
And
literally like 20 minutes you can never get back, sweetheart.
yeah, and I'm like, well, I that's strange thing to even think about to bring up later in topic as a complaint that you have in
Yeah.
a friendship now. You know, I just
Right. And these are not the, these are intelligent human beings. Like, these
yes,
are not people that are just dullards that have nothing to do. Like, these are
right,
busy, intelligent,
professional.
productive, professional human beings.
Yeah,
And so it's all, yeah, it
yeah,
is so interesting, and it's disturbing, and but
yes,
it's a real crack
yeah.
in our human
It
sort of
really
psyche
is.
right now.
It really is, and it's important, I think, that we have stories like yours that keep helping us see the layers of perspective and personal truth versus, empirical truth and these types of things
Mhm.
and how they get mixed up in these mediums. So this is going to be a great story for right now on the planet, and I'm super excited. Again, we'll have all the details about how you can attend this show virtually
Yeah.
through the Santa Fe Playhouse, and we'll have those links in our show notes for November. But we're also here to talk to Kristin today about a second project, which is a feature film project that you're
Yeah.
working on called Tucumcari, which I'm going to read a little description that I got off the website for it to give everybody a little idea. And we'll also have a link to the website in our show notes. But Levi Stein is dead, leaving behind a stash of hidden drug money, his dysfunctional Jewish family, a disgruntled waitress, a desperate business partner, and a dangerous middleman in Tucumcari, New Mexico, where redemption and forgiveness awaits them all. So this guy sounds like he got himself into quite the pickle.
Sure
And
did.
I love anything that's set in New Mexico. I moved here when I was 5, so I kinda
Oh,
consider it my home place.
mhm,
I moved to
for
Albuquerque
sure.
when I was very young. I've lived in a few places in adulthood, but came running back to New Mexico because I love it here compared to where
Mhm.
else I've lived. So I'm curious about a few things. Can you tell us just a little bit about this story, what inspired you, and kind of how its placeholder became Tucumcari, New Mexico for it?
So when my husband and I were moving from Chicago to Los Angeles many years ago, he's from Santa Fe and I'm from Albuquerque.
Okay.
And I was going to graduate school in Chicago, and he was acting on the stages there. And so we were there for about 10 years, and then we decided to move to Los Angeles. And we had driven through Tucumcari years before to we came back to Santa Fe to get this truck that his family was giving us so that we'd have a car in Chicago.
Mm.
And we decided to drive through Tucumcari, and it was the middle of summer, and we got in the truck and drove, and it just kept breaking down,
Wow.
overheating, overheating, overheating. We got stranded in Tucumcari. And all these weird things kept happening, and like I kept seeing dogs everywhere, and they were looking at me, like looking through me. And I was like, something's up, like there's an omen, this is weird. And my husband was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And we met like a weird mechanic that was, very like, small town, like, well, we got to get a part. And we were like, okay. And he's like, it's going to take a week. And we were like, what? What is happening?
Yeah.
Just found ourselves wandering around Tucumcari and exploring it and waiting for our car to get back on track. And finally, we decided we just had to drive back to Santa Fe.
Yeah.
So we did. And there was no problem whatsoever with the car after that.
Wow.
So then the next day, we got up and drove up north through Denver. We decided to go that way, drove 24 hours straight all the way to Chicago so we could get home. Um, Years later, when we were moving to Los Angeles, we stopped in Albuquerque, and I was talking to my dad, and I was telling him this story. And my dad's an environmental scientist, and he listened to the story, and he said, well, you were driving east on I-40 in the middle of summer in an old truck. What's the model? What's the make? What's the year? I told him. He goes, well, if you're driving the same speed as the wind is and it's going the east, then you don't have any circulation in your engine, so it's going to overheat with the. And he explained it in these terms that were so real.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, so it wasn't like an omen? He's like, no, I'm pretty sure it wasn't an
Yeah.
omen, kid. So moved to Los Angeles, and I wrote a short. I wrote a short based on this, but it was a very different story,
Yeah.
but it had the elements of what I experienced. And I mean, just through various ups and downs and here's and there's, meeting with, you know, producers whose daughters wanted to star in it. Like, I mean, just LA. That's all I can say. Just
Yeah.
having so many weird experiences. And I just kind of tabled it for a while as a short. And then time went on, and I decided to write it as a feature film. So I did. And it's the one script that I have never sent to anybody
Oh,
in
wow.
the business.
Yeah.
I, I, I just kept it to myself, and I just thought, this is something that's going to happen. And I didn't really think about directing it at first because, we're from a generation where I think, I moved to Los Angeles, and I had some mentors there who were writers in the business, women. And they would say to me over and over again, you need to direct, you need to direct, you need to direct. And I kept looking at them going, well, why aren't you directing? Like, why am I like, what? take care of yourself. And but I came from that theater background, and I came from that world as a woman where we're taught to collaborate. And I was like, well, I want to collaborate, and I want there to be all kinds of voices, and we bring it all together, and we're all just
Yeah.
happy. And but as I went through the system in Los Angeles and met with every studio and met with all these producers and had optioned many, many scripts and made money off of rewrites and this kind of thing, and then everything just dead
Yeah.
over and over again because somebody would get fired and then move to a different studio, and you're just like, wait, that's it? Like it's over? And it was just over. There was
Yeah.
just no discussion. There was no conversation about taking something somewhere else or anything like that. So we moved here, and I had a deal fall through with Lionsgate, and I was devastated because
Yeah.
my manager at the time also was moving on to just partner with one director. And so I lost my rep and my deal. And I was just like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm
Yeah.
in Santa Fe. Like, who am I going to call? Like, I don't even know what to do anymore. But then I started to network more, and I started to meet all the talented people here. And as soon
Mm,
as I started to think as a independent filmmaker, as a person who didn't need to rely on the yes man or those executives,
mm,
I started meeting people that then were interested in what I was doing, and I was interested in what they were doing. And I built like a support base of people who, and mostly women who were in this business and who were excited about storytelling. And so from there, it's just been a little bit of a journey of people jumping on, jumping off, coming
yeah.
back, and finding the right mix of people. And so now I have two producers I'm working with, Deborah Wachshall and also Alexandra Renzo. And I'm working with Alessandra Calza as my editor. And it's become just a very different experience because I'm not waiting for the phone to ring, and I'm also
Yeah.
not waiting for notes. I learned a tremendous amount about writing. I learned a tremendous amount about collaborating. I learned how to tell a room full of men who were telling me to rewrite the male character as more interesting, even though it was the female story.
Yeah.
I learned how not to like scream at them in the moment and rather just nod my head and then like end the meeting and then go hit the wall and scream and then come back and
Yeah.
like look at them and go, oh, I get it, you guys. You don't get it. See, he's the wife in this story, so he's not interesting. She's the
Right.
lead. And like not be necessarily condescending to them, but kind of gently call them out on their behavior of what they were trained and we're trained to
Absolutely.
do. So although it's taken a long time to get to this point where I am directing this film, and I do have this great team of people, and we are looking for this financing, and we are moving forward on things. And it is this great story about like healing and redemption and family. That I believe that the script is as good as it is, and the team is as solid as it is because the struggle of going through all those meetings and all those conversations that were so
Yeah.
uncomfortable and so just demoralizing at times,
Yeah.
it gives you a resiliency where you find your clarity. You go, oh no, this is exactly what I want to do. I don't know if it makes it easier or not, but I think that it just makes you a little happier. That's for sure. you
Yeah.
know
Absolutely. It's almost like time kind of let you know it was time for you to be more empowered in how you put your work into the world. And sometimes that's
Mhm.
just a necessary part of our journey, to kind of get kicked out there
Yeah.
on our own for a minute to see, like, oh, wow, I actually
hmm
can pull this off on my own. I can find my own way.
Well, success is a really it's pretty subjective in terms of like, is it about money or is it about
Right.
talent? Is it about the quality of what you've done? And I've had to go back and look at so many of my scripts over the past 5 years, and I have had to have some real moments of reflection where I realized that I was writing some of my scripts from a male perspective because that's what I was trained to do.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, what a shame it would have been if I had sold this and got it made. And that's what I put out there. It's fine. It's money. It's a career. But it's a regurgitation of something that I don't really want to continue to put out there.
Right.
And so that conversation is still out there and it's still a real struggle. Alexandra, my producer, and I were on a call with some investors, and a very big producer guy was giving notes back through this investor on what they thought about the script, and he loved it and had all these great things to say. But one of the things that was brought up in that conversation was you have your influences seem to be like Coen brother-esque. And I was like, absolutely. That's sort of
Yeah.
that's a vibe that's very clear in this film. And I love their films. And he said, yeah, so one of the things we were talking about is like, maybe if there was just a little more rock and roll, like a little more like like more guns and more um just sexier and like just and as he's talking about it, I'm taking it in and I know exactly what he's saying. But we get off the call and I talked to Alexandra and I was like, that's the problem, is I don't want to perpetuate that.
Right.
There is a gun in that movie, but nobody uses it. And that's the point.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want somebody to get shot up. I don't want my female protagonist to be such an idiot that she actually uses the gun on someone and doesn't think about the consequences. I
Right.
don't want my female lead to have to be sexier in order to be taken, seriously or be interesting.
Right.
And I think that they are interesting already, and she is sexy already. And so it's also that patriarchal influence that I think we're all still under, and we're all still trying to figure out this model of storytelling, which, I know that somebody wrote an op-ed about it, and I got so many emails because I've been talking about this forever, about how this 3-act structure is like a male orgasm.
Mm.
And it has nothing to do with the female perspective. We have bought into it and it works, but it only works because we've been trained to see
Right.
story in that way. I mean, I watched Lady Bird the first time and I was like, huh? And then I saw it the second time and I went, oh, this is like a 1-act. She didn't follow a 3-act structure. And then I saw all the other nuances that were created, like the male characters were softer and more vulnerable. And Lady Bird was sort of unapologetic. And she was sort of like, I don't care what you think about me. And I'm going to do these things. And I don't have to be sexy for you. And it kind of opened this part of my brain where I started to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, where I thought, you have all these films across the pond that are, they go, people will be like, your writing's very like a French film. I'm like, you mean it's not male? It's not
Yeah.
this American screenplay.
Out of
It's
the
not,
formula. Mhm.
yeah, which I can totally appreciate those films. But I feel like I can look at a lot of female filmmakers, maybe not even a lot, maybe just a few,
Mhm.
that have had to perpetuate that male perspective in order to be recognized, in order to get jobs, in order to do certain things in the business. And so you can look to them as sort of a mentor, but at the same time, you're just kind of falling in line. You're
Yeah.
not giving a voice to a perspective that desperately needs to be heard and in a different way. I first noticed with um, Ryan Coogler from Black Panther.
Mhm.
I took my daughter to see Black Panther, and she'd seen all those Avengers movies, and I thought they were all extremely violent. I was like, why am I showing this to my child? Why is she not upset? I'm really upset. Like, how many more aliens are they gonna kill? And and so Black Panther, and we're watching it, and the whole opening, like first 20 minutes, I was like, oh my God, this is so violent. This is so violent. This is so, so violent. And I kept looking at my 10-year-old, just being like, why? And I kept going, are you okay? And she's like, I'm fine. I was like,
Yeah.
God. I was like, no, this is so violent. Later on, as I was walking out of the theater, and it was such a brilliant film and I loved it, but I walked out and I thought, oh, it's because he was shooting this from a Black male perspective.
Hmm.
And so you look at all those other comic book movies and you see it's all sort of like this imperial perspective where it's like the violence is there and we're over here and we're going to just oversee it. It's very white. It's very male. It's very like we're above all the violence and it's happening, but it's happening over there.
Yeah.
I remember one of the shots that first struck me was he put in a shot where the gun, like the camera was at the shoulder and you saw the angle went to the gun and then the gun shot and you followed the bullet and it hit. So he took it into this like very personal perspective of actually
Yeah.
shooting somebody, which I hadn't seen in any of those movies. And that's when I went, oh my God, this is really violent.
Yeah.
But what it did, it had the impact of like, yeah, this is really violent. It is violent to shoot somebody, regardless of you being a superhero. Like,
Hmm.
it is a violent act, and it should be revealed as that. And I was so blown away that all those movies had been made, and even, God bless Wonder Woman, but it still had this very like, there it is, and we're over here,
Right.
and she's fine. Don't worry. Oh, they're fine. It's mayhem and people are getting killed, but the ones that we care about are not. So it really opened my eyes, and I was like, Black men, Black women, women of color, LGBTQ, women in general, like we have to be able to express our perspective in a way that is specific to our experience without somebody putting the white patriarchy, putting the thumb down on us and saying no, because that's not entertaining that way, or that's not sexy enough, or that's just not rock and roll enough because Tarantino did it one way. You have to do it the same way to prove that you are at his level. When
Right.
I would think, hopefully, someone like Tarantino would never expect that of somebody else.
Exactly.
And then perhaps a lot of these films will be recognized and lifted up that don't follow that 3-act sort of violent, sexy structure. But then you also will start letting these people that aren't white males go, oh, well, what if I did it this way instead? Because that's how it feels to me. And start finding that clarity of
Yeah.
like, what does it feel like to you? Like, don't worry about what the audience needs to feel because the audience has been trained. You need
Right.
to untrain them. You have to show them something that's so vulnerable that you don't apologize
Yeah.
for trying it, you
Exactly.
know?
Exactly. There's some great films that do that. And actually, the Coen brothers do that a lot in their projects where I find myself having two very distinct, different emotions at the same time. I'm like, I'm
Uh-huh.
laughing and bawling. I'm like, what is going on right now? I'm having very
Yeah.
polar opposite experiences
Yeah.
simultaneously. And I love
Mhm.
that kind of storytelling where you know, because oftentimes I think we often even get ahead of the story, like we start predicting where it's going to go, right?
How
Because
could
we're
you
so
not?
trained how to follow the formula.
Yeah.
And so it's great as a viewer to have a writer shock you out of that pacing and
Mhm.
force you into a different place of examining this person's narrative and their perspective and how it's affecting you, what it's making you feel. It's a
Did you
very
ever Sorry, did you ever see I Love Dick?
no.
that too. Like when I watched that, it was only one season because they were like, we can't keep this going. It's too
It's out of
female.
formula. Yeah.
And every episode, like I was like, the first episode, I was like, I don't know. But then I watched the second one, and then I was up till 2:30 in the morning. I watched the entire first season, and I was like, what is happening? Oh my God, they're doing whatever they want.
Yeah.
They're revealing choices that are taking, like, I'm like, oh, okay, this is where, wait, what happened? They didn't do that? What?
Yeah.
And it all felt so authentic. And it kept you engaged in a way that it was uncomfortable
Mhm.
because you weren't used to it. You were like, oh, I don't know where this is going, but I know where this is going because I
Right.
innately know this feeling, and it's very intimate, but it's so vulnerable that I'm really uncomfortable with where this is going.
Yeah.
And it, I mean, it comes down to, yes, the writers, definitely. But see, I have friends who are female writers send me scripts all the time to read and give them notes on. And I see it. I see it so clearly
Yeah.
when a script comes through that she's trying to write a male perspective because she's trying to hit all the marks that all the script readers look for. And then I see a draft from another friend who doesn't try to hit all the marks, and it's this beautiful, authentic story.
Right.
So you've got this one that they're hitting all the marks so that the reader will read it and pass it on to their boss. And then you've got, and it's not authentic and it's not their best work and it's probably not going to go anywhere. And then you've got this really authentic story that's not going to hit that 10-page mark, that, 15-page
Yeah.
mark.
Yeah.
And that reader is going to go, oh, and stop reading. And then it's not going to go forward. So neither get put on to the table of the person who pays the people to make the movies. And we're stuck in this sort of cycle of like struggle where women are still struggling to just get a movie made. And even if you hit those marks, it's not it's not authentic to our experience, and it goes back to, and it's not cut and clear, obviously. This is
Right.
all just my opinion from my own experience, so take it or leave it. But if the male hormone, right, even just orgasm alone, but their hormones, they start and it goes like this, and then it drops, and then they die. Okay. Female hormones, they can't even measure them. Like we couldn't even get the same female hormone therapy if we were at the same age, the
Right.
same place, the same doctor, because it's like the changing of the wind. So are female orgasms. It's like all over the place. It's not predictable, and it's not boom, boom, boom. So
Right.
we are living in a world where storytelling for generations is saying that the male experience is how we tell stories.
Yeah.
And if it's not that way, it's not entertaining and it's not good and it's not worth putting on someone's desk to make. And so, you do get once in a while, you get like a Moonlight and you're like standing up going, thank you, thank you. Oh God.
Yeah.
Or you get a Ladybird and you're like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That's different, and you have this poetic experience with writing and directing and collaboration all together. But it shouldn't be so few and far between, and it shouldn't be so hard to convince someone to give you money because your storytelling doesn't fit this really just boring model. We're so bored with it that we're watching TV like it's heroin.
Yeah.
We don't care about story anymore. All we care about is character.
Yeah.
So everyone's addicted to television now. And it's like, but there's movies, and movies are about stories. And
Yeah.
stories should be like, they should have a beginning, middle, and end. It shouldn't have to take 5 years to get to the end of the story.
Right. Yeah.
you
Yeah. We
know?
almost consume so much of it, like a drug. We're no longer taking it for the bliss or the high. We're just trying to avoid the withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah.
It's like, our consumption is almost practiced.
Mhm.
rather than desired, for
Mhm.
why we're seeking out storytelling. It's, unfortunately, I think what's happened is it's drilled down so much to where you're pretty much watching these, especially on television, so many basically same footprints just recycled with, a different back set and lead
Mhm.
character, cast, that we almost watch it purely for distraction, right? It's just
Uh-huh.
like, I don't even know what's going on. I just need to not have my life interacting with me right now. And it's just,
Oh, for sure.
yeah, it's a place to go and kind of go mentally dead, emotionally dead,
Mhm.
Um
But
I'm
people don't want the ending.
yeah, yeah, they don't want it. I always tell people, you know, it's hard for me because I don't watch a lot of modern film, because a lot of it is for me. I'm like, because I'm one of those people where I will watch, like, I'll see a scene from like, say, a Marvel movie or something, and I'll be like, if this is really happening, thousands of people in those buildings that just toppled over during this Superman
Yeah.
fight are like dead and burning, and nobody
What
seems
ifs?
like, what's gonna, are we calling FEMA? What's happening there? And then of course everybody's like, Carrie, that's ridiculous. This is not reality. Um, and so I tend to dwell in a lot of classic films,
Mhm.
because they didn't have all the flash and bang and effects. And so they did have to rely on stories, they had to rely on the characters, they relied on emotions a lot more.
Yeah.
I tell a lot of people, man, watch The Heiress, with Olivia de Havilland. That movie, what I love about that movie is it is pathological love on a lot of different levels, and it never gets better. There is
Yeah.
no happy ending. It
Mhm.
it makes her hard and bitter. She doesn't
Yeah.
end up better for it. They don't end up better for it. Like, nobody ends up better at the end of that. And what I loved about it was what she experienced as these false forms of love that these men in her life, were giving her. That's more realistic than, like, "You've Got Mail," like,
Yeah.
than, oh, just having this perfect circumstance where in the end we're gonna meet and kiss in a park and everybody's gonna be happy.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, 9 out of 10, it just doesn't
Yes.
end up good. It just doesn't. And that's the
Yeah.
reality of human dichotomies and relationships and all these things. And so, I think it's great that you're helping through your stories people get a little knocked off that formula, because there's a lot of our social behavior right now, that is merely just role playing because we've been told for so long that's how things are supposed to be,
Mhm.
so there's a lot of people that are growing up and going into marriages and parenthood and things like that, and actually they have no interest in doing any of those things, and they're not very good at
Mm.
them, but they've been told for a long time that that's how humans
That's the
grow
norm.
up. You get work, you get a you get a partner, you have
Mhm.
kids, you know, and it's hard. Like, I'm a person that I was like, I don't like any of that. I don't like the way
Mhm.
any of that sounds. I don't
Right.
feel comfortable in it. It doesn't feel like I get to be my genuine self. It's not the things I want to focus on. And
Yeah.
so at 45, I often get the weirdest reactions from people as a person that is not even in pursuit of partnerships. It's just not something I choose into on any level. And I don't have kids. And I was 9 years old when I told my mother I don't want to do that. Like, I knew very young. Oh no, I'm clear. We're good. You guys,
Yeah.
my sister will have one or something. Like, I'm good.
Yeah.
And but it took a lot for me to hold my ground that was my truth, including forcing myself into relationships I was uncomfortable in. My apologies to anybody I was in relationships with before. I know it didn't go well, like, but I just was like, I don't like any of this. I
Not
don't
my
need to do
jam.
it. It's not
Yeah.
my jam, man. Like,
Yeah.
it took a lot for me to be able to even just admit that. Like, I don't see the point in us having to do that role modeling and our storytelling. All those things have played into this formula, like you've been talking about, that have
Yeah.
really affected our mental and emotional health as everyday humans, because if we don't fall into the formula, we feel like something's wrong with us,
Well, we're
you know?
told something's wrong
Yeah.
with us.
Yeah.
I mean, over and over again, it's just
Yeah.
reflected back in such an amplified way
Yeah.
that how could you not be like, oh, wait, am I supposed to have children by now?
Right. Well, maybe, gosh, because people look at you like almost like, oh, you poor thing. So, and I'm just
Well,
like, I'm just having a different experience than you. You
right.
realize that, right? Like, I'm not, I'm perfectly
Uh-huh.
healthy, happy human being. I just have a
Yeah.
totally different experience, and I've had to kind of, sometimes when I've had conversations about that, it's been kind of that narrative. Like, I'll say, like, no, I don't get to experience motherhood, but you also don't get to experience being a freelancer and doing whatever you want and taking
No,
risks
I don't.
and living life for just your own, simple choices,
Yeah.
not having to worry about, well, what do I do for the kids,
Hmm.
Um, I got a cat that's good to roll. So,
Yeah.
like, we're good. We're good. I can just make free choice, right? And so I tell them, you're not going to have that experience, and it doesn't actually make either one of us better than the other
Mm-mm.
one, right? It's just
No.
we're having a different journey, and a
And
different
it
story unfolds on that.
and those experiences should be told and they should be
Yeah.
written about. And yeah, that I do touch on that in hashtag under the influence, because the two sisters, one is a mom and one is not. And at one point there is a conversation about the influencer mom who says, she's at a point in her career with that where her followers were at a certain level, and then she saw the other mom influencer was pregnant and her numbers went up.
Mm.
And the one sister's like, did you get pregnant with Alice so you could up your numbers? And her response is, oh, says the woman with no children.
Yeah.
And so it's this pitting against each other thing.
Yeah.
And then her response is very, she doesn't recognize her response being what it is, but what she goes into is the conversation of like, why do people have kids?
Yeah.
Because of a societal norm that tells them to. So if I'm monetizing my children, how is that any different than the parent who's putting their kids all over their Facebook page but not making money off of it?
Yeah.
My kids hold more value to me, is what I say.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
so it's this weird conversation where I was like, yeah, because why do people have kids? Because they're trying to keep up with their neighbors,
Hmm.
because their friends are having kids, and they go, and the sister goes, well, maybe it's community. And she's like, oh please, they're not having kids because of community.
Yeah.
They're having kids so that they can continue to be in this circle of people. And like, it's like buying a car. It's like which neighborhood, it's like which
Right.
school. It becomes this norm that they buy into.
Hmm. And they
It
have
has n-
to fit the picture,
that
you
it's
know?
about this idea that was implanted in their head,
Yeah.
and now they follow these rules and they've become this thing, and they're not thinking,
Yeah.
they're just doing.
Right. Yeah, it's just like they're plugging in these puzzle pieces, based on this external picture on the box.
Hmm.
Well, some of us land like I landed, and I was like, I have all edges. I don't, I can't put my puzzle together. I have no idea what's going on in here, and nobody gave me a picture. So we have to figure it
Right.
out on our own. But I think we're the lucky ones in a lot of ways, because we
Absolutely.
question all that is considered the normal.
Hmm.
And I think oftentimes those of us that are like that, we tend to become creative storytellers, right? Because
Well, you
it's
hope
a nice
so.
way for us to help, like, go, so I have weird things in my head that are contrary to the popular, right?
Right.
And I think it's great. I think it's just, I really am excited to see more about Tucumcari, and I want to talk a little bit more about its stages of development and how we can
Hmm.
help connect you with people out in the world about the project. But I'm just excited to talk to you today, because I find this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this series. Is I also want to challenge us to tell stories differently. Let's evolve. Like, let's finally
Hmm.
catch up with some of this stuff that keeps passing us by, even though we're the ones creating it. Like, let's evolve a little bit and
Hmm.
improve. And I love that you're trying to kind of knock people onto their heels a little and feel a little out of their, kind of comfortable zone when they
Yeah.
engage your work, because I think that's more and more storytellers, I think, need to see that translate to feel the confidence, because I think more and more storytellers are starting to feel like this counterculture way of writing and explaining and putting
Hmm.
narrative to things, but I think it's a nervous trend to follow, right?
Hmm.
Why,
Yeah.
what if I get rejected? What if my script doesn't get picked up? And then there's these social pressures that tell us, just don't try and change it right now. Just, and I love that you're tackling that, because we need role models for future generations of filmmakers to decide that we can change this story arc up a little
Mm.
bit. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be so singular in who it accommodates in our society.
Yeah. And there's the challenge of not having a lot of role models is real. And when I was in my 20s, I did not really fully appreciate that. And I couldn't really appreciate why I wasn't going down that road of directing and writing. Um, one of the first scripts that I wrote that got me all my meetings in LA was about a Latina, and it was a horror movie, and it won at some festivals. And there were a lot of my Latina friends that were like, "You wrote this?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I grew up as a minority in my group, so I was really lucky to have a very Latino influence on my storytelling just from observation."
Yeah.
Um, but nobody would give me money to make the movie because it was a Latina female lead. And I remember I was at Copelson, and there was a development executive there who I was talking to. He loved everything. He was like, "If you directed this, you'd win Sundance." And I was like, "Well, are you gonna back it?" And he was like, "Yeah, we're not doing it. We're not." And I remember sitting in that office, and there was like a pool table and a bar and like all these masculine, like it
Yeah.
was so masculine. And I was like, "What am I doing here? Like, this is so
Yeah.
weird." So they were attracted to the storytelling. They just couldn't, and they still can't. I have a Latina lead television pilot that's set in LA, that's based on my 5 years working juvenile detention camps with at-risk youth.
Oh, wow.
And it won the best pilot Nashville Film Festival. I can't get anybody to pick it up
Mm,
because they will not pick up a script that is a Latina lead in a drama.
mm,
Comedy, they think Latinas are hilarious. They can be
right.
funny but like try to find except for maybe a J-Lo thing.
Right.
There's nothing out there with a Latina lead that's like a real Latino story.
Right.
It's like
Other than like,
really about
yeah, what do they make him, a drug lord or something? That's the only
right.
thing that,
Yeah, unless it's a
yeah.
drug. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that script, the script that I wrote there's one supporting character that's white. The rest are all people of color.
Mm,
And it's all about LA, and it's all about at risk and who's at risk. It's politics, the judicial system, the juvenile detention camp, like everything. And I even got a note back from an agent at one point that said, "I just don't believe the dialogue." I was like, "What do you mean?" They're in the detention camp. And I was like, "Oh, the dialogue that like my partner on this, Leo Vargas, and I like we worked in that detention camp, and he's a Latino and he grew up in San Diego, and we wrote that dialogue, but you don't believe it's real." Like they have such a weird skewed view of
yeah.
what that is, that even the real stuff handed to them, they go, I don't think that's real."
Yeah.
And so you're up against that. And so if you can, as a 20 something year old in this business, if you're a person of color or LGBTQ or you're a woman, like if you can make that short film, and you can get that together before you have your kids or your property or your main job or whatever it is that's like
Yeah.
really taking your time, and you have that group of friends around you that will do it. Because I made those short films where everybody just did it with me, and nobody
Yeah.
was like, there was no rules or anything. We just made stuff.
Very guerrilla. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you didn't think about like if you had to like comply with certain things, you just did
Yeah.
it. You know, and somebody would yell at you and you'd like run away. Um, so, but if that that is the time to do it, and just don't wait around for people who are role models, because it's you know, the older you get, the more you know,
Yeah.
and the more cautious you are, and the more you follow the rules, and the more you try to get in the doors appropriately, and the more cautious you become just out of survival.
Yeah.
And so if you're young enough and you're like waiting for someone um, like an Ava DuVernay to influence your perspective, don't. She's got her own thing.
Yeah.
Do your thing, and know that, you know, her perspective is her perspective, and that's great. But she's also a totally different entity. And, you know, if you're a Latina and that's your role model, the only person you can think of, that's okay. You
Yeah.
know, she's a Black woman. Your perspective is going to be a Latina woman. Go for it. don't don't look at her model and think that it's the right way either. Be
Yeah.
inspired, and then just attack it the way you would, the way she did, you know.
That's why
um
she's successful, right? Because they decided, I'm just going to share my own perspective. I'm going to do it this my way.
and
And
she
I'm going
didn't
to
wait to be perfect at it.
exactly. I think it's great for every storyteller to really understand your inspiration is experience, right? Like
Hmm.
living life, observing human experience, observing the planet, right? This life experience, there's your inspiration for storytelling.
Yeah.
Yes, use other people to keep you motivated. Like, yes, I'm watching other people be
Mhm.
successful. I can do this. Your inspiration for storytellers throughout the ages, right? It's been storytelling has often been something that's passed down as an honor. You know,
Yeah.
you now hold the tribe's stories, so it's up to you to share them with everybody and relate them to what happens to our community next. And that used to be kind of the storyteller, used to be a very important part of the society, right? Because it
Yeah.
handed down the history, the knowledge passers, right? And so those storytellers, they didn't have like, okay, guys, I got all the books. They were, that's not how it was handed to them. It was
Starting with
them.
Aristotle, everybody.
Yeah, they went and sat with the original storyteller, and that person
Hmm.
shared with them the stories, and it was up to them to absorb them and
Yeah.
experience their life and understand the story, and then figure out, okay, so I'm going to tell this story with a butterfly because that's what I experienced transformation through,
Yeah.
whereas my teacher experienced transformation through a fire, right? So suddenly
Right.
the story changes a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Still the same tribe history, but the new influence or the new storyteller gets to be a part of shared experience still, and I think that
Yeah.
when we celebritize or idolize and want to be too much like somebody else's career, we actually completely block all the stories that would come to us, like you
Hmm.
said at the beginning, there's those stories that just literally download in the weirdest moments. You could be brushing your teeth, on a
Hmm.
walk, doing the dishes, and from cover to cover, I know the theme, the title, the character, and I know that I'm the one that has to deliver it to the world. And when you're only focused on following somebody else's direct exact footsteps, you miss all those downloads because you're focused on
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
yourself. So it's such an important thing, I think, to share in this series. I'm so glad you've brought up this conversation and that this has been such an influence for your projects and how you're delivering them to the world, because it is so important right now when all of our logic has become circular, and there is no more empirical truths. And so I don't even know for sure if I could go out and share the sky is blue with people and not get questioned and contradicted right now, even though I'm like pretty sure we're all seeing blue unless we're colorblind. you
Oh
know,
my
so,
god.
so
There's a whole scene in Hashtag Under the Influence between the three characters that goes through this whole thing. It's hilarious and it's super funny, but it's so at the same time you're like, what
well, yeah,
is
like
happening?
we are through the looking glass, folks. We have officially
Hmm.
dived in, and
Yeah.
we've grown large and we have grown small, and we are eating and drinking things that are changing reality before
Yeah.
our very eyes. And so it's great that this is the perfect time. Might as well now when everything's in chaos. Look, this is the
Hmm.
perfect time for filmmakers like yourself to just come in and challenge every narrative and every theory and say, I think there's a different way to really produce and share stories right now with people.
Yeah. I'm super excited that this group of people have come together to make this project happen because you just never know if it's going to inspire other people that you need to collaborate with in order to get something done. And
Yeah.
I found that with Tucumcari as well, like just the people that have come on board. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Thank you. Like, oh my God.
I was gonna say you've put quite a great team together. When I looked at the website, I was really impressed with everybody you have supporting the project. Deborah Wachshall, also a women film member and one of our board members. So
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
yeah, I actually just got to be in a meeting with her, and she was super excited to hear that we were interviewing and talking about your project today.
Yeah.
So
She's just such a great, the energy she brings is so supportive and positive and collaborative. Um, and then Alexandra Renzo, who just is relentless in her pursuit to get my stories out there.
yeah,
Um, uh, and then I've been collaborating with a couple of other people in Los Angeles. They're going to come on board. Who some people were out of my reach just from like what their salaries are, but then they read the script and they were like, I want to do it. Let's do
wow,
it. And I think that comes from like that group of people that if you don't if you don't put yourself in a situation where you're like, this has to happen now, you you're able to trust that the right people are going to convene, and you could get some people that you would never have dreamed of getting on your
yeah,
team, who are going to bring such a wealth of experience that maybe you don't have in that area, to the project, so that your project, it could take longer to get to the end result, but it's going to be what you visualized. And
yeah,
so while I think there are times where you have to push real hard on certain aspects, and you have to really put your nose to the grindstone and make everything work out as the director, there are times where you also just have to breathe and go, okay, I'm going to turn to something else that is moving
yeah,
and put my energy there, so that this starts to accumulate some space around it.
yeah,
Because I'm always like, don't choke the chicken, you're going to kill the chicken.
yeah.
Yeah, and it gives you an opportunity to be creative when something may not be happening at the moment
Yeah,
outside of your own little vacuum. It can be a very lonely world of being a writer.
yeah.
You start to think, you do. So at some points, like I have sent off scripts to people where I'm like, did I just send, like, you're like, what? Did I send them a script that said, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy? Like, did I just do that? Like, am I crazy? Because
Yeah,
I feel like I need someone to tell me, yes, this is it. Because you do feel so isolated sometimes, and
yeah,
it can be kind of cloud your brain. But my first manager in Los Angeles was, I took his advice very to heart, which was just keep writing.
yeah,
Whatever you do, don't stop writing, because as soon as you sell the first one, the others will go.
Mhm.
And um, that's not always true. But, if you're optioning work and you're getting paid for that, and you're in development and you're working with directors and you're working with producers and you're fielding notes and you're staying true to the project and you're staying true to those characters, you pick your battles.
Yeah.
Really pick those battles, because one note, if it's this little thing that you could change and you throw a hissy fit on that one, guess what? The next note is going to be massive.
Yeah.
And if you already threw a hissy fit over that one little thing, you don't get to throw a hissy fit on the other one, because
Mhm.
you're that high maintenance person. So you pick your battles, and you learn those things through developing and failing, and like having projects not happen, but it becomes, you get a work ethic where you can turn something around like that, because you know it so well and your craft is so honed in and your storytelling is so clear that, even if it's like you get a note from a director where you're like, well, the end scene, I need this to happen, is that possible? And you go, sorry.
Mm.
uh
Yeah.
my main thing has been saying, I can't see that right now, but give me a few days. And I just think and think and think. And usually it's a thread that I have to unravel through the whole
Yeah.
script, but it's never made my script worse when I've agreed to do it.
Mm.
It's always made it better. If I don't agree to do it, then I have to really know why, and I have to really state my case, and you have to state it with grace and with
Yeah.
intelligence and like be ready. And
Yeah.
every single time they've gone, oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Mm, so you learn a lot through all the struggle and the fail. And it sucks, and you cry, and you and you feel like you're never going to get anywhere, and there's no guarantee you will.
Right.
But I say to my daughter, who's 11 years old, and she thinks I'm like the greatest writer ever, and I sometimes say to her, I've never had a movie made, right? um just don't go tell everybody I'm the
Yeah.
greatest writer ever. um I don't want to explain why it's never been made. um but I say to her, you know I love what I do, and this is my purpose. And whether everybody in the world gets to enjoy my purpose or not, it doesn't really matter in the end. What I get from it on a daily basis is what matters.
Yeah.
And so you can withstand any amount of failure and rejection, and the amount of rejection I've sustained is massive. But then those wins are just so much more satisfying, and they
Yeah.
fill you so much. And then you're ready. Like, you're ready for like the big deal moments,
Yeah.
because you haven't just been sitting there. You didn't just write one script
And
and it
become a
got
huge
bought and then it got
success.
made. And
Yeah.
then you're like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing. Oh my
Right.
God. Like,
Yeah.
what the hell's happening? So, I
Yeah.
mean,
It's so important and I think a lot of times, our successes are, actually more from our failures, our technical failures, right? Like loss, rejection, failure. Those tend to actually be your real successful moments, because that's where you learn and you
mhm,
grow, hopefully, and you examine and you allow for some change and some shift, and it's when we have things work out and when we win, that's a great feeling. But I always encourage people to recall, when you go back to your winning moments, you don't really learn in that moment. You're like, yeah, I won. And it's just
yeah.
rewarding and it's fulfilling, but it's not a learning moment really, right? It's just a reward. And
And
so
it's fleeting.
yes, and so hold on to those what we call failures, because in
Mm,
there, that's where all your good storytelling is. That's where all your good development as a professional is, so that you can handle big meetings, big talks, big note
right.
discussions, right? Like, you have to be prepared for all of that. And if you don't grow, you're always going to sound like an amateur,
Hmm.
right? Because part of our sounding experience is that we're able to talk about failures and what
Yeah.
doesn't work, right? That's part of being coming across as an experienced person, is I can go, yeah, well, I can tell you why that change won't work. And
Hmm.
I can lay it out X, Y, and Z. we can't do that if we've never actually failed and gone through that trial. So
Yeah.
that's a great, I think that's something that's so great to share with everybody, especially a lot of the younger writers that, the rejection is very difficult and it's hard to feel like, am I doing the right thing? Should I stay on this path?
Hmm.
Even outside of film,
Oh yeah.
writing in any genre, it's difficult. I'm a poet, so I
Oh
only have
wow.
to write like 7 words, and that's still challenging. So
Sure, because you only have 7 words.
yeah,
It's
it's like,
even harder.
how do I make this point in syllables,
Oh my
So,
God,
it's,
that's
so we
crazy.
all feel that, but use that for your storytelling. I think that if
Hmm.
we can help people feel that today, then we've done good work in the world, me and you, Kristen. So again, you have a great team of people on Tucumcari. What stage of development is Tucumcari in? Where are you at with that? And kind of what are you needing as far as assets and people to help move it to the next level?
Well, money. We have Chicago Media Angels is interested in working with us, and they're a film fund in Chicago. They're a fantastic. I would love to have a film fund in New Mexico like this.
Yeah,
It's a board of like 70 investors. And so they are interested in funding our film and matching funds with other investors.
fantastic.
So like 350, $500,000, they are interested in those matching funds. We also have another investor that's interested in putting in either the back end money in post or having smaller investments like 50,000, 50,000, 50,000. Right now, this new budget that we had created, I believe, is with COVID and everything in it,
Yeah.
is three, I think 3.5, and then it goes down to 2.5 with a rebate. I'm not sure. I'd have to talk to Deborah and Alexander about that
Yeah.
a little bit more. But what we need is people who are interested in investing in a film that
Mhm.
is shot in New Mexico, that highlights New Mexico, that is a film that is about family, it's about reconciliation, it's about healing, and it what one of the things that I would love to do is create a community of investors who are attracted to putting money into filmmakers who live here
Yeah.
above the line because we don't we cannot make this film industry more successful if we don't start um, finding investors who want to invest in filmmakers that live here.
That's
I
right.
don't care if they move from LA and they live here full time and they're not from here, like,
Right.
fine. But you've got Netflix, you've got NBC, you've got these big companies, but that's all below the line that's getting the meat from that.
Right.
And then our government and our cities. There is such a vast amount of talented filmmakers here, and a lot of female filmmakers here
Yes.
in New Mexico. And so this film is predominantly female led from key positions.
Wonderful.
It's also most of the key positions are all New Mexico based. I think just my costume designer right now is LA based. And she's doing this at a much lower rate. And she and I went to college together, so
Yeah.
that was a win for me. But I think that it's investors. We need those people that give money to the opera and they give their money to different foundations here
Yeah.
to look and go, wait a minute. The opera is here for a summer.
Yeah.
Film is here 365 days of the year. And oil and gas is like this, like it is so unpredictable. How about you invest money into film that is sustainable here in this state, that doesn't depend on Los Angeles, and that can compete with Atlanta and can compete with New Orleans? I mean,
Yes.
so that, the studios are built here and sustain filming that stays here, and you don't have to write up legislation just to keep somebody's pilot here, constantly trying to like revise it from a legislative point of view.
Right.
Like, how about the people with all this ridiculous amount of oil money put it into the films, and that can sustain their oil? When their oil money goes down, they have the film money going, and
Mhm.
it becomes like sort of a symbiotic relationship where it's not against each other, it's with each other.
Supportive,
And
yeah.
so my my hope is that those people will start to like look around and see the film industry as not only a good place to put money
Mhm.
from a money perspective, but that it's a relationship that they can build to make more money.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be as sexy as Hollywood. It can be hometown love and an economic maker for them. It can boost the economy here so that we're not dependent on all these other factors outside of this state.
That's right.
And we don't have to like jeopardize our industries here. Um,
Right.
and then
But
you get
yeah,
more perspectives as well.
exactly. Yeah, and if we really do want to solidify our this industry as a key export of our state, right? Which I know
Yeah.
before she was elected our governor, that was one
Mhm.
of her goals was that film would become an export of the state and a key
Mhm.
industry that we
Yeah.
cultivated and nurtured on an ongoing basis. And if we're going to do that in a real way within the film culture, right? Because you
Yeah.
have your policies as a state, but then you have film society and what film and the entire film market is going to tell you what you can and can't do as well in
Yeah.
this industry. And so if we're going to establish a better foothold and a better position of owning our own work, that type of thing, we have got to have a stronger above the line network that
Yeah.
is just made up
And
of every key position, a lot of
yeah.
diversity, a lot of women, a lot of minorities, right? It's got to look and feel like the Society of New Mexico, because that's what we are.
Yeah.
We're a lovely little melting pot out here, and there are a lot of women in film out here
Yeah.
compared to other cities that just are impassioned and determined to
Mhm.
do this as their futures. And so to set a good foothold for that and a good foundation for that, right now, all of us need to be focusing on strengthening our below the line numbers and volume and talent so productions can
Mhm.
come here knowing there's plenty of people to hire. You don't got to fly anybody in, but
Mhm.
also saying, man, but good luck because New Mexico turns out so many of their own movies. It's hard to hire anybody because they're always all working, right,
Yeah.
on local projects.
And it's
That's
so,
kind of, I think, the good goal for us to move towards.
yeah. And these investors, there's so many people that I just feel like nobody thinks outside the box. It's so frustrating because you see places like Atlanta and you see what's been built there, and
Yeah,
that's what we could have been, but
absolutely.
we still could be that.
Yeah,
But it's always like, as much as I would love rec cannabis to be legal, I'm like, yeah, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, there's so many different things you have to deal with that,
yeah,
for tax incentives and money for the state. There is a freaking gold mine of
yeah,
sustainable, economic boosting and building that is legal,
yeah.
sitting right here,
No
and
debate.
has the talent, and doesn't need to have a bunch of quorums and conversations and debates about it.
Right.
It is a business model that works,
Yep.
and there's always an audience. And like, what why are we always looking over somewhere else? Like, these people need to put some money into this, and
Yeah.
definitely into minorities and female filmmakers. And
Yeah.
if if New Mexico had a model like Chicago Media Angels, or the San Francisco, they have their like media angels too, like
Yeah.
where they had a film fund and those minorities and women could come in and pitch every quarter, get
Right.
money from those investors to put into films that then go to different areas of New Mexico, and suddenly you've got southern New Mexico or the eastern part of western part of New Mexico that's never getting any economy
Yeah.
from tourism or because of whatever. Then you have whole film crews there that are putting money into these economies. They're building sets, they're building like relationships. Those, pecan farmers that are making all this money right now, put it into film industry so the money comes back, and your pecan farms aren't just dependent on, the weather. Like,
Right.
there's global warming's happening, everything's going to start to change. Like, this is something that is so easy
Yeah.
to like control
Yeah.
in this uncontrollable world, and everybody's looking around like they just don't know what to do with it in this state. And I'm like, come on, just
So
give us money.
yeah.
So yeah, so I just need money for my movie.
Yeah. Well, honestly, that's most people's kind of what I need next when they come on the Storyteller series for their projects. It is a lot of it is bottom dollar kind of stuff.
Yep.
It's what helps you. Look, we're trying to make films the right way. Everybody wants to get paid, right, for their good work that they do, and for that, you got to fulfill a budget.
Yep.
And but yeah, it's just there's what I think that we need to remember, and putting up a good fight like you're doing yourself, Kristin, is focus on it, stay in conversations, talk to people, suggest ideas, suggest angel group collaborations,
Yeah.
pull it together. And then one of the things I know, like New Mexico Women in Film, what we're planning on doing with our new board, we really revitalized our new board this year, came in and just changed because we have a lot of diverse working women in the industry as our new board members, so that because they're
Mhm.
so active in their own professional careers, they're just kind of blowing up our own model to help prepare filmmakers here to be more successful. And we're going to start figuring out, like, how do we pull more advantage from our chapter memberships with Women in Film and Television International or Women in Television US, right? So
Mhm.
we can grow our network, but also how do we grow our numbers here so that we can go knock on Netflix's door or NBC Studios door or other great professionals and business owners, even in the state, and say, here's why it is so great for you to collaborate in grants and scholarship and
Yeah.
funds and
Mhm.
angel networks, so that your massive amounts of well, it's pretty much no bag on Netflix, but a lot of it's credit, let's be honest. But you gotta be
Sure.
credit line Netflix. So
Mhm.
share some of that wealth, baby. We're happy to help
Yeah.
put it to good use out here. And so yeah, for investors, local, national,
National,
international,
local. Yeah, and
you're
just
interested,
the
talking to Kristin, we're gonna have all of our content in our show notes, so that you can help her. Look, she's already got some people talking money, so this is the time for
got
investors
people that wanna
to
match
kick in.
funds. They're
Yeah.
ready to roll.
Investors are quirky, everybody's always waiting just for the other investor to pull the trigger first. You get stuck in this, well, I have
Mhm.
7 second investors. And everybody's like, what do you mean? Well, I have
I
7
know.
people willing to give me money after somebody else does first. And you're like, okay, so it's often that we need that first courageous person to come in and give Tucumcari what they need to get going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah, I want that brave person. I want
Yeah.
that person that says, "Oh yeah, yeah, I wanna do this."
Yeah.
I want that person to look across the bar and see me and say, "She's fun. I
Let's
wanna
do
hang
it.
out with her for
Yes.
a month on set." That's what I see, like, so, yeah, give me those people, because those people, I like people who are brave, and I like people who see
Yeah.
beyond their fear or their hesitation, and they can share a vision of something um that is gonna it's gonna make an audience feel good, it's gonna make an audience think, and it's gonna make an
Yeah.
audience want to go back to a movie again.
I'm definitely
Yeah.
going to check out hashtag under the influence in November. And I can't wait to hear more as you get more and more going with Tucumcari. Hopefully we can have you back
Yeah,
and
that'd
we
be
can
great.
talk more about that and any other projects you have going on. Anything else about your work or the industry that you want to share with our viewers before we go?
I'm pretty sure I bared my entire soul. I apologize if I like put anybody to sleep or if you have to edit this down dramatically.
Oh, no way. This was great.
No, I I just love telling stories and I love watching other people tell stories. And so, it's I just want people to be authentic and I want them to
Yeah,
tell stories that they need to tell, and enough of the regurgitation of the same old, because I have to expand my perspective as well. And if I keep seeing the same thing over and over again, I'm still going to be a dullard like everybody else.
right.
So that's what
Absolutely.
I want more. I want more perspectives to
Yes.
challenge my thinking and my kind of idea of what things are supposed to look like or be like. So
Yeah.
I
Thank you so much, Kristen, for
thank you,
joining me for
Carrie.
this episode today. And everybody, we will have Kristen's episode out soon. I will have all the notes for Kristen's projects in our episode notes for this. So please make sure that you subscribe and follow us on YouTube, where this will be released along with the other episodes of the Storytellers Series by New Mexico Women in Film. Make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know when new episodes drop, and also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, your favorite social profiles, so that you can hear all the latest and greatest from filmmakers like Kristin about her projects from the state of New Mexico.